Alrighty, so welcome to QnA Answers 3. Hello everybody. Today we'll present answers to the first pack of questions, and in a couple of days we'll return with another one. Have they done another one? Why has work on legendary upgrades halted, and aren't there any plans for rebalancing existing ones or adding new ones in the next few months? At the moment, quite a few are in need of rebalancing, and there are more tier 10 ships without a legendary upgrade than there are with one. The response: we are currently working on new unique upgrades. However, work on these is carried out with a certain frequency, which is caused by the production process of these upgrades. As such, players shouldn't expect to see the release of new unique upgrades too often. Usually we would start working on a unique upgrade for a new branch ship only after a set amount of time has passed since its release. This is necessary so a large number of players have had enough time to research the particular ship. It's good for players to actually have the shit if you're going to design stuff for it, as well as play a significant number of battles in it. It's good for players to play the shit if you're going to design for it. With this information, we can then gather detailed statistics on the ship among all categories of players. Yeah, okay, which would make sense, like if you're buffing the guns, or you're changing the torps, or you're whatever. We continue analyzing the data on the current state of the ships and prepare to create new unique upgrades, as well as focus on the balancing of those already present in the game. Right now, many of the design ideas for the unique upgrades are in the early stage of development, but we will be sure to share more details with you as they are ready. One thing that's worth noting, if we go back to the World of Warship thingy, when they did the Research Bureau initially, which, oh god, is that like a year ago? I think it was like a year ago. The Research Bureau was flags and ships, and also if you had Research Bureau points, you could get free XP with it. You could get like a 250,000 free XP or something, so I guess that could help you like work toward a Smaland or a Friesland or something. But they took that out. When they did, they added all the unique upgrades in, which was, oh god, this is like May of last year, so this is a little over a year ago. And when they did, they actually altered a lot of these. They did balancing passes on all of this stuff. So it's roughly a year old. I mean, some people are going to like some of them. Some people are going to not like others of them. Realistically, like the whole intent behind what is a unique upgrade is it just extends the play experience on a ship. So let's look at, for instance, where is it? The Z52? Because I like the Z52. Do I have it? Yeah, I guess it's down here. So there we go, Z52. So this module goes in slot 5. So normally where your concealment module would be, this module can go there. Instead of reducing your detection by 10%, it reduces it by 5%. So the Z52's detection would go from 6.1 to 6.4, but it reduces the torpedo to reload by 15, as well as the detection range on the torps by 10%. So basically, you kind of convert a Z52 into a makeshift Benham, but it's not a Benham, because the detection is worse. But it has hydro, which is cool, and its guns are better than the Benham, so there's that. But like, the whole reason or concept behind the unique upgrade is, it's not that it gives you a better way to play the ship, because in which case then everybody would just play the unique upgrade and there'd be no choice to it. When you're playing a game, you want choice. That's what keeps people interested. That's what keeps people, you know, dicking around with stuff. So most Z52 play is going to be a gunboat build, because your detection is 6.1, your hydro is 6. So as long as you get within that 100 meter, you know, difference, you can kind of bury somebody in your hydro range. Then you just pop smoke hydro and you murder face them while they can't see you or do anything about it. So typically that means guns. Well, if you pop this, they can detect you outside of your hydro trap. So you still have hydro, you could still theoretically use the hydro to trap something. But if you're going to double down on torpedoes anyway, then you're not going gunboat build. You're going to get torps on the commander, torps in slot 6, torps in slot 5, torps in slot 3. So, I mean, you're going to be a torp build. And I think you chuck torps like every 56 seconds, which is just bizarrely low. So it's like Benham levels of throw torps, only you throw 8 instead of 16. But anyway, so again, it's not about like making the ship better. It's just about giving you a different way to do stuff. So for instance, like At some point, they'll put out a unique module for the Richthofen so that it plays different. Maybe its bomb reticle will be tighter, but it'll have like terrible damage or something. Fuck, I don't know. Maybe you give it HE bombs. That'd be kind of unique. But whatever the hell they do, it's not supposed to make the ship better or worse. It's supposed to make the ship different. So that someday when you're feeling it, you're like, man, I want to play this ship, but I want to play it a little something else. You swap a module and then it's a little something else. So whatever, man. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I don't see it as like a huge crazy-tastic thing, but whatever. All right, next. Oh, as far as like doing all this other stuff, I mean, they're literally saying, usually we start figuring stuff out after a set amount of time has passed. People have to buy the ship, people have to use the ship, and then if they find out, well, the Z-52 is a gunboat doing gunboat stuff, why don't we try it as a torque boat? Hey, it's different. Okay, the Venezia does things in this way and this manner and this whatever. How could we fuck with it? How could we change it some? How could we tweak it? Could cut the detection by an amount, but make the gun reload worse. I don't know, something. You know, they could figure it out. Make it like a super sneaky stealth DD killer. I don't know. Anyway, seems normal to me. Why, with the potential addition of submarines, has the standard 12v12 format remained? Currently, we don't plan to increase the size of teams on the main type of battles. Let me just double check this is correct. It is. There we go. Currently, we don't plan to increase the size of teams in the main type of battles, which is random battles. This is the primary game mode for the game. Competitive, off modes, brawls, all that other stuff is just ancillary extra things. This is the lifeblood of the game. This is what people play. This is what people buy ships for. Because of a few reasons. Every ship is balanced around the interaction of a specific number of ships. Changing the total number of ships on the map would require us to completely reconfigure all ships in the game. Even now, despite our attempts to balance across not only random battles, but other battle types as well, the performance of some ships still depends on the amount of players in the battle. In addition to the ships themselves, maps and modes which are suited for 12v12 format would also require a complete overhaul if anything were to be changed. The more ships there are in a battle, the less influence in the outcome each individual player has. We find the level of effective impact that an individual ship has in the 12v12 format to be optimal for random battles. That being said, we're also aware that the matchmaking system may require changes with the addition of submarines. As such, we are now considering additional limitations which would affect multiple classes together. For example, both subs and destroyers, or destroyers, submarines and aircraft carriers, e.g., ergo, no more than 5 destroyers and subs combined. At the same time, the current limits on each class will remain. So, big thing is, I think the reason why people were asking this was, if you have an aircraft carrier, all right, that's one of 12 slots, and you've got 3 battleships, okay, you've only got 8 slots left. You've got 2 cruisers, you've got 4 DDs, you've got 2 subs. You start pulling health out, because on a whole, most people aren't dealing damage to the carrier because the carrier's off in the middle of nowhere, you know, playing hide and go seek and stuff. And subs are pretty much assumed to, one, have almost no health at all because they're subs. They're not, you know, robust warships waiting to take a beating. And 2, they're probably hard to kill. They just dive, you know, at least until they run out of dive juice or whatever. And are forced to surface while they regen it. So if you start pulling out 100, 150, 200,000, you know, health out of these random battles, if like there's a crap load of subs in it or something, there's 4 subs, holy shit, there's only 1 battleship. Like, for people that play the game where they want damage, they want actual brawling kind of interactions and stuff, well, suddenly the CV's off in the middle of no man's land and the subs are all underwater. It's like, where the hell are the surface ships? Isn't the map going to feel large and lonely? Which, honestly, is a serious question. And they're going to have to figure that out. So my personal guess is there might be like 2 subs per side. Because, I mean, if it ends up being like 3 or 4 or 5 or something silly, I mean, yeah, it's almost like there'd be nothing on top of the water. What the hell? I'm sure they'll dick with that, but I do want to actually talk about every ship is balanced around the interaction with a specific number of ships. So for this, I used to play a lot of League of Legends, and League of Legends is designed around 5v5 combat. So there are characters that their ultimates do damage to 3 enemies, and that's it. Does a lot of damage to 3 enemies. So in a 5v5 game, you can do a lot of damage to 3 of the 5, but you're not going to do a lot of damage to all 5 of them, for instance. And they're balanced around that. That's how it works. Well, then they had a mode which was 3v3. So suddenly, you've got a character that it's not that they're dealing, you know, a huge amount of damage to half the enemy team. They're dealing a huge amount of damage to all of the enemy team. How do you balance that? Maybe you change it so that for that specific mode, this character only deals big damage to 2 people instead of 3, and like you start needing a second design team. You start having to change how this character interacts with, you know, the other size of the team, the other formats and stuff that it's going into. Or you could think of in terms of this game, like the GK, the gross occur first. If the first thing you do is sail headlong into the enemy while all 12 enemy people are awake or alive, you just get murdered, because there are theoretically like 6 or 7 or 10 people that are all shooting you, farming you until you're dead. You die. However, if you play the GK, you kind of take some pot shots at range, kind of figure out what you want to do, get pissed off, somebody lit you on fire for a little while, and as time goes on, more and more ships get sunk. You start to become more relevant in the mid and the late game, when if you've conserved your health, you've got a lot of armor, you've got your health left, you've got not only your guns, but you've got secondary pressure, then you can start to move in, and instead of getting dunked on by 6 and 7 ships, you're getting shot at by 2 or 3. 2 or 3 is something that a GK can handle. Maybe it burns to the ground, it's possible, but it's more designed to interact with those number of things. So it's more of a late game ship per se in that sense. Whereas other ships that are extremely accurate at long range are almost more early game ships, because they're going to trade at long range, potentially take some ships off the board and set their team up for success. But when it comes to the later, more close in, more brawly situations, maybe they don't have that. So when they say like, well, we designed this with an interaction on a specific number of ships, like, think about the last time there was a brawl. Hell, there's a brawl now. There was a brawl or something where it was a battleship, cruiser, DD. What did you see? Battleships with secondaries. Why? Because they could go close. Because they didn't have to worry about 6, 7, and 10 ships that are farming them right out of the middle of the game, just dead. No, the first thing they did was just slam that shit forward and secondary the crap out of anybody, because that's exactly what they could do. So that's what they're designed around. But in that 3v3 version, you just pulled out one of the limitations, which means the ship is going to shine. How many Yamatos or how many, you know, long-range sniping battleships did you see in the 3v3 version? Not many. Why? Because at 3v3, you're immediately expecting to go into brawl. So 12v12, in the beginning of the match, there's 12 ships on both sides. In the middle of the match, there's maybe 8 ships on both sides. In the waning moments of the match, there's 3 or 4 ships on both sides. It gives you more of an early, mid, and late game, which honestly, if you look at like League, or you look at, honestly, there's a variety of different games, but is having an early, a mid, and a late game, and each kind of having them feel independently different, actually helps kind of to narrate a player's story as they're going across the game. So when they're saying, you know, this is built around a specific number of ships, it is. And when you start changing it down to like 7 ships, I mean, ranked is technically, it's different than random. It is. As for the changing the maps and stuff, I mean, if you went up to like 15 by 15, are there enough hidey places for all the cruisers? Are there too many places for crossfire? Is there too many guns to be able to move forward to actually effectively shoot at each other? Do you have a prolonged trading phase? Like, there's a lot of stuff that could happen there. I almost think that 12v12 is too many people, because there's some times where it's like you just feel locked out in some ships for like 5 or 10 minutes. You're just waiting for something to do because your guns suck, because you're designed to go in closer. So you can't trade effectively. You're just kind of like playing the waiting game, which kind of blows. But I mean, it is what it is. I think we addressed that. In the last Q&A, most of the changes suggested by the community, including good players, were dismissed outright as wrong/false by Wargaming staff answering the questions. However, weeks after the Q&A session, I don't know what the last Q&A was, I'm sorry, so some of these suggested balance changes were implemented anyway. Wasn't that with something like Yu Yang is fine, and then they buffed the crap out of the Yu Yang or something? Wasn't that the meme? I don't know. I think that was a while ago. This begs the question whether there's such a communication gap between those answering the Q&A and those who are implementing balance-related changes. The response, actually, in the case of questions and feedback related to the balance of ships, there is no communication gap. When answering any questions about the balance of the game, we always consult with our balance team in order to share the most relevant information with our players. In these situations, balance changes that occur within weeks of a specific Q&A can happen for a variety of reasons. For example, such changes may have been considered by us already, but we weren't completely sure of their relevance and as such didn't announce or comment on them earlier. The decision to make the changes could have also been made based on new statistics or feedback, including questions or suggestions from our Q&A sessions. So, I think the like Yu Yang is terrible and then they buffed Yu Yang thing. I think that was the meme, you know, that probably relates to this. So there's, I mean, just being realistic here. Let's think about two different ways that this could have gone down. Option A, the Q&A people go to the balance team and say, hey, we had a question about the Yu Yang, are you looking to buff it? And the balance guys go, well, we're looking at something, we don't know if we're gonna go with it. For right now, we're not sure, just, you know, the Yu Yang is workable, it's fine, it's whatever. But maybe we'll do something in the future. Option A. Q&A said the thing, and then a few weeks later, the Yu Yang got buffed because it turned out that, you know, they tested it. Yeah, this really does work, and they kicked it out. Or option B, Q&A team goes to the balance team and says, hey, they're asking about the Yu Yang, what the hell? And the balance team goes, you know anything? You know any problems about this? No. As far as I know, the Yu Yang's fine. Okay, Q&A session goes back, get it internet, types the thing, and for a lark, the balance team pulls the numbers, looks at it, goes, oh, actually, maybe this is kind of not okay. Let's tweak this. Let's fuck around with it. Yeah, actually, this does feel better, and then it gets kicked into the game. In both of those situations, the Q&A person is not like intentionally fucking with you. They went to the balance team, they got an answer, they rolled with the answer, they did their job, they moved on with life, and then the balance team did whatever the hell the balance team was gonna do. All I know, at least in terms of what I can add to this, is that I've had a conversation with a dev on the community contributor Discord that has said, it is my job to interact with you, it is my job to collect all of the feedback that is on this Discord, and it is my job to collate it and send it up the line. And you know, he's a dev, he works with other devs, he gets the information out there. Whether they choose to act on it, whether they choose to move on it, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. But to say that is it being ignored or dismissed or whatever, it's all treated as part of a puzzle. Because you're gonna have how do I do this? If you are designing something for a user, and I was listening to a game developer conference talk about this earlier today, and I think it was about sound, which is what it was. But if you're designing something for a user, no, it was a different thing. I think it was viable product stuff. Anyway, ultimately the user is gonna want X. Now, there's gonna be some mistranslation. There's gonna be some back and forth, and frankly, some haggling. Because a developer is going to know what they can and cannot do, and a user is going to want what they're going to want. And sometimes it's going to end up being a meet in the middle sort of scenario. When it comes to game design, there are a lot of people that want a lot of things. So you're going to have to, like, inevitably, if you choose to do what the community wants, you've ignored what a third of the community wanted, or half of the community wanted, or 2 or 3 other versions of the community wanted. Because the community does not want one single thing. And further, as a game developer, I mean, you're also going to be leaning on your own experience here. The fact that you grew up making games, or you're employed making games, that it's actually fucking a job. It's like if you're going to an electrician and you're trying to tell them how to wire the house better. I went to school for this. I do this as my job. I memorized a code book. I've taken tests and trained out on this. I've done this for years. Yeah, but I really think you should run the wires that way. Okay, well, I'll take that under advisement. Does it mean that they won't do it? He might look at it and go, actually, that might save me some time. And then he might do it. But to expect that, well, a bunch of people came up and told the electrician how to be an electrician. I mean, you have to have at least a semblance of humility on this one. You have to at least attempt to put yourself in the shoes of, like, if somebody's coming up to you and telling you how to do your job, one, there's going to be a little bit of natural friction there because people get protectionist, they get defensive, sure, but also when you have somebody that legit trains in a thing, like, I don't know. Is it to say the community's always wrong? Fuck no. Community knows what the hell the community's talking about because they know if they're pissed off about something. But often the way to fix what you're pissed off about may require more nuance or more, I don't know. Anyway, I think we talked about that one enough. You keep claiming that you take statistics as well as player feedback into account when balancing ships that I guess this is in the same vein. Yet there appears to be a distinct lack of acting upon feedback I commonly see from top-level players. Ones that are most qualified to identify balance and gameplay issues. Many other high-profile games such as Dota, League of Legends, CSGO, TF2, Overwatch, Rainbow Six Siege successfully incorporate top player feedback in a way that they make targeted changes to equipment and characters in a way that makes them not overperform at the highest level of play while also being reasonably well balanced for the rest of the player base. This begs the following question: do you consider top player feedback more valuable than average player feedback, or even valuable at all for that matter? And are there any plans to involve them more in your balancing processes? At least consider this approach for tier 10 ships if you intend to hold further competitive events with tier 10 ships. The recent acquisition of the COTS tournament is another argument for this. All right, well, this looks like a lengthy reply, so that's cool. And I do want to say to hi all the people in chat. Thank you very much for the subscription, Maestro Hulk. Yeehaw. I will do like a Q&A at the end. So mostly I'm just going through this. So if you're just like, why isn't he talking to us? I'm just trying to do the thing because I'm going to clip this all out, kick it up to YouTube, and we'll, yeehaw, do the thing. Okay, we evaluate player feedback from various sources. While it may indeed be true that the players who share feedback do tend to be the most involved and skilled players, we take all levels of feedback into account, not only from our testers, but also from all our players. Although we listen to feedback from top players, we cannot say it is more important than any other feedback. The colon makes it hard to, say the sentence. Than any other feedback, such as opinions of any individual player is equally of value to us, I guess. We take into account constructive criticisms from all players who are willing to share it with us. To further elaborate on this, we invite players to participate in both the public test and the main server tests of ships, referred to as prod test. Product test? I don't know. And fill out surveys accordingly. Additionally, we collect feedback on the main platforms of our community. Among our test groups, we have had clan and super test groups for many years, representing almost every group of players, from the most skillful and involved to the not so experienced ones. And that is true. Their test groups have both super unicums as well as completely averageums. Because ships are going to perform differently in different hands, and if you're going to test it, you need that information. You need people that are amazing at the game, you need people that are not amazing at the game. It's how it works. Their feedback is extremely valuable to us. These players participate not only in the standard super tests of new updates, but also in various tests of concepts and new features of the game. The reaction and feedback of these testers to new concepts have a significant impact on our decision and how we will work with the feature/mechanic. In addition, we periodically hold additional recruitment for our closed test groups, which I think they do on the forums. And any player, including top ones, can apply there in order to participate in the process of testing and balancing the ships and other content. We usually publish news about this on our portal. And, getting back to the topic of top players, a good example would be COTS. Throughout such tournaments, which the strongest players take part in, Our colleagues work closely with the tournament organizers to adjust specific rules and format limitations to be the most suitable for top players, since it won't always be representative for our normal game modes. Yeah, realistically, I mean, if you're going to be competing in COTS, going against really, really tough competition for, you know, we are the champion of the world kind of gig, the majority of the stuff that's going to happen at the high end is going to be high end play. So you don't really have to balance it around the normal end play like you would a random battle or brawl modes or something. While not necessarily related to the discussion of ship balance, we can also discuss our interactions with top and other skill level players using clan battles as an example. We work closely with players on the results of clan battles and send them surveys. In particular, we are interested in their opinion on the matchmaking system, both the speed of the matchmaking as well as the quality of selection of opponents. These are two related characteristics. Quality of selection on opponents. Are they still talking about clan battles there? Because, I mean, randoms are supposed to be completely random. These are two related characteristics, and it is of the utmost importance to find a balance between them that suits both ourselves and our players. We also use the results of these surveys to select maps for the new season. Yeah, still clan battles. By filtering out the ones our players found to be the most problematic. We hate this map! Through the use of polls, we find out how much players like certain feature we have introduced. For example, with the introduction of mercenaries, we understood this was missing from clan battles and knew the feature itself would be well received. It was. I remember when mercenaries were announced and like people were like, oh my god, I'm gonna make so much money, I'm gonna work for the clans and they're gonna pay me, it's gonna be amazing. Yeah, nobody gives a shit. You bring in a friend or two to fill out your clan stuff so you can fucking play. Like the whole mercenary thing. Well, that was a controversy that lasted a day. Shit, where were we? Oh yeah, we understood that this was what was missing from clan battles and knew the feature itself would be well received, but strongly worried about the UX part, i.e. if there would truly be an intuitive interface. The utility interface thing. Surveys showed the vast majority of players using the feature very quickly figured it out. Players in surveys often give suggestions, and we are eternally grateful for these. I'm sorry, the wording. We are eternally grateful. Although I do actually think that not a lot of people actually fill out the surveys, so people that actually do fill out the surveys are probably pretty excited about that. Unfortunately, said suggestions are occasionally not feasible given current circumstances. That being said, the idea of restrictions on certain chicks during the season was ultimately made in part due to feedback from players. On a related note, you'll be interested to see how we've responded to feedback regarding CVs and clan battles. To put it simply, we've made adjustments over the past few seasons based on feedback, and player evaluations of seasons with CVs are now close to the evaluation of CVs without them. However, we are still working with that aspect of clan battles. We will happily explain our plans for future clan battles in a separate reply. Holy shit, that's a lot. So, long story short, why aren't you taking the best people, the best of the best, the creme de la creme? Why aren't you taking these people's words and bending the game to their will and making it the most perfectest game that it could ever fucking be? Well, realistically, because most people aren't super unicum. And I mean that in the actual literal sense of the word. Most people are not super unicum. The amount of people that are super unicum are like 5% of the player base, 4, maybe 3. I don't know the actual number. So obviously it's a game. You need to be able to pay your devs or else they just leave and they don't work for you anymore because ain't nobody's doing this shit for free. Do you design a game and use the pinpoint accuracy of perfection that is the Super Unicum experience? Or do you add some fuckwithableness so that it can work for the average person? The answer is you add some fuckwithableness, because the average person has to be able to play the game. If a Super Unicum wants to go around farming people, catching cool spots on the leaderboards, and have an amazingly super complex gameplay, fuck yeah, man. Random battle is this game. Not clan battles, not brawls, not the one-off things, not the Halloween events. Random battles is this game. And while they mention up here some other stuff, TF2, League of Legends, CSGO, all that shit, there's a huge difference. For instance, like in Overwatch, if I watch Kefri, which I like watching Kefri until he like starts ranting about stuff, that dude is fucking superhuman. I mean, like, he does things that they should not be possible, but he does them. There was a time where enemy or whatever jumped across his screen back behind, off in the distance, and he flicked his mouse without seeing where the hell this dude's head was. Flicked his mouse, swung around, headshot, and came back to the point where you did not actually see a frame of that shot on that person's face, and this dude's running at 140 frames a second or something. Like, it when it was rendered for YouTube, you didn't get to see a frame of the shot. It just bam, and he headshot him and killed him. Like, that's pretty bizarrely insane. Whereas for the more average person, you're gonna do stuff that, I mean, they literally have supports where you don't have to aim. You just point in the general direction of your teammate or something, and the heal beam comes out, or the helping stuff happens. When they're designing this game, they have to design, and with the super test thing, they even have like not amazing players in the testing groups to make sure that average basic BS players can perform in basic ships. And there are some ships that are hard as hell to use. Like, legit, they're hard as hell to use. I think the French DD line is considered to be mechanically intense. The new German destroyer line is considered to be like, you know, if you've got some extreme skill and forward thought and positioning and all that shit, you can milk those things. Oh, you can make them sing. But if it turns out that you don't have that, then they're just big, fat, slow ships that get murdered because they get penned by AP and slaughtered. Like, everybody's going to have kind of their areas. I recognize this concept, but the long and the short of it is, Wargaming has made the actual literal decision that 95% of the player base is larger than 5% of the player base. And as such, they will factor in the average players as equal or probably more important than the high-end players because there are more of them. I mean, it just is what it is. There is actually a really cool line in here, which was surprised. On a related note, you'll be interested to see how we've responded to feedback regarding CVs and clan battles. They did some balance tweaks to the CVs, and then in the more recent one, they banned 2 of them. They banned the Hikaru and the FDR. But to put it simply, we've made adjustments over the past few seasons based on feedback. The fucking storms that block sight off the CVs. Ugh. And player evaluations of seasons with carriers are close to the evaluations of CVs without them. So, you know, they dove in, they took that plunge, they added carriers to clan battles, they dealt with all the slings and arrows and angry fucking language that was going to be thrown their way. But they've found ways to make clan battles work so that people are able to deal with CVs similarly to games that don't have them, which I think is actually pretty amazing. I didn't know that. That's a pretty cool statement for me to read. Anyway, why are you so secretive about sharing detailed ship statistics when asked about statistical proof of your stance on certain ships or state of balance? And another similar question. Players often judge a ship's power based on statistics available to the entire WoW's community versus via third-party websites, typically ship win rate, ship KD ratio, average damage, average experience, average frags, total number of battles are the common metrics available on these sites. However, in past presentations, Wargaming developers have discussed different metrics used for balancing, such as ship effectiveness versus class, and ship win rate versus player win rate. What objective metrics are used by Wargaming when balancing ships? Do the metrics typically agree with the player base? For example, do the metrics show Kaba or Zhao as underperforming? Do the metrics show Petro as overperforming? And finally, is there a threshold in the metrics which will cause the team to look into rebalancing the ship? Some ships are rebalanced frequently, others remain unchanged for years. It would be great to hear your insight on this. Well, I am curious. Let's see. We rarely share stats because there are a fairly complex internal tool for balancing ships. When preparing a ship to go live, many different factors and indicators are taken into account. It's important that we not only communicate these stats, but also that we do it in the most convenient and digestible form while providing thorough explanations. Yeah, they tried to do that with the CV thing, the 2019 summit, and I mean, people just tear that shit apart because they just pick the stuff, they pick the stuff that they want to look at, and they don't take it as a whole. So I mean, They did try putting the information out there, and if that was the test run, it didn't work very well as far as the community response to it. Anyway, in general, this has been a possibility we've explored, and sometimes we do indeed share our data with players, but since this requires a significant investment of time and resources, we do not plan to do it often. Going back to the 2019 summit, yeah, they made a full presentation. Like, they did research, they did data analysis, they put all the shit together. They presented an hour of this to community contributors, only for community contributors to turn around and shit on it and start screaming about the spreadsheet. So it's like, if they're going to sit down and put 10, 20, 30 hours of their time into performing basically what amounts to a PowerPoint presentation to tell you about a ship, and the response is, ugh, they just don't get it, the spreadsheet. Like, why fucking waste your time? Like, being serious, why waste your time? If the community isn't the balancing team, I mean, if the community doesn't like X or Y, they'll say, we don't like X or Y, and then the balancing team can try to look at it and figure out how to unfuck X or Y. Do they need to have all this information to be able to say, I don't like X or Y? No. But would it be nice to have it? Yes. But the last time that happened, it got fucking torn to shreds by the community with the spreadsheet. I just don't think it's going to happen again, which sucks, which really fucking sucks. Anyway, that being said, I'm certain we can share more information about the balancing of our ships in the future. The story of what metrics we use for balancing is a topic for a separate discussion. Long story short, we take into account the percentage of wins, absolute damage, relative damage, average number of destroyed ships, interactions with key areas, potential damage, analyzing how a ship plays against each class of ships, and a significant amount of other statistics, because they're going to have more information than any third-party site's going to have. In addition, we analyze all of the above across each individual group of players. They did this. They did this in the 2019 summit, where they said, you know, let's look at what carriers do in the hands of, you know, players based on skill. And they didn't say how they sorted players as, you know, being average skill or above average or below average. They didn't go through the metrics on that, but they have divined an internal formula to be able to figure out people that have a clue versus people that don't have a clue. And they can look at, how do these people do in this ship? How do those people do in this ship? Whereas for the third-party sites, you just kind of have like the top 50% of the populace does this, the top 25% of it does this. Like, you can't actually pinpoint, which is probably useful information. Sorted not only by their skills, but by other parameters as well. Other evaluations of the ship does coincide to some extent with that of the players, and to some extent it does not. For example, Zhao and Khabarovsk are both within the norm in terms of combat effectiveness. Khabarovsk became very effective after the limitation on damage from large calibers. Is that reversed? No, I don't think so. Yeah, that was a change they put in 2 years ago-ish. And Zhao is one of the leaders in terms of numbers of battles played on her. Oh, I think this is the soundbite that people are bitching about. How the Zhao is one of the oldest cruisers ever. Shit like that. I think the counter argument to that is they would have information as to how many Zhao games were played in the last month, or, you know, last 2 weeks or last 3 months or whatever. I'm sure third-party sites would be able to give you that information, but I've not really dicked with them to be able to milk it. So that might be a thing to look into. If you could look at how many Zhao games were played in the last month. Which I imagine you could, because I see people like judging CV effectiveness, how many CVs were played in the last week or the last month or some shit like that. So I don't see tons of Zhaos. I'm going to be honest, I don't. But for all I know, they might be one of the more played ships. I don't know. This may sound rather obvious, but you can always get an indication of which ships we consider to have statistics outside of normal ranges by checking balance changes in the patch notes. Yeah, so a year to a year and a half ago, evidently when they nerfed the Yu Yang, they just beat that shit into the ground. They just slammed it home. And yet, Yu Yang is still capable of doing what it does, mostly because it's got the really good smoke. But they actually commented on that. I think Sub-Octavian commented that on the TNG, Bogsy, and Synpax podcast thing. Back when Synpax was still playing the game. And I think Sub-Octavian said, yeah, we fucked up. You know, we messed that one up. that was not okay. So I think after that is when they started doing like, the daring's doing too much damage. They nicked it down by 0.2 seconds per shot. Still doing too much damage. Nicked it down by 0.1 in the next patch. Nicked it down by 0.1 in the next patch. That kind of bullshit. I remember carriers used to have a 20-kilometer vision on their planes. And then the next patch, 19. Then the next patch, 18. Then the next, 17. Then 16. Then 15. And I'm thinking like, Jesus Christ, when are they going to stop doing this? I think they stopped at 15. So there's a lot of times where I can see one side of the map, but I can't see the other. I have no idea what's happening on the other flank other than just looking at the mini-map. I have no idea for health totals, no idea for any of that shit. Which is fun, but it's part of the gig. It is what it is. Anyway, at the same time, we try not to touch the ships that are within normal range. Even if there is a slight deviation, this is so as not to unnecessarily change the game experience on a particular ship. I can understand that for two reasons. One is, if a ship's doing a little better than it should or doing a little worse than it should, if they start fucking with it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So could you buff it? Sure. Could you nerf it? Sure. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the other thing is, if you are balancing other ships, if you're dicking with, you're tweaking some other stuff, the less stuff you fuck with, the better, because the more informative you're gonna, or the better the information you're gonna get off the changes you did do. Because if you buff this ship but nerf this ship, they might have like a weird interaction that makes one of them feel over-tuned or something. So technically, I mean, these can kind of go hand in hand. Fluctuations on the win rate and efficiency of a ship is normal. The game does not stand still. New mechanics are added. The popularity of ships change. Like with the American battleships, holy shit. Once the Vermont dropped, people started playing US battleships all the time. Ergo, due to the addition of a new branch, like the US battleships, and there are, of course, changes in the meta. Therefore, there can be some fluctuations on win rate / efficiency within a single iteration of a ship, even if she herself was not changed. Sure, the world changes around you. You're different as well. If we see that a ship is steadily underperforming or outperforming in her tier for multiple subsequent patches, we will start fixing it, i.e. like tuning down the damage or chipping up the damage or whatever. Though this is a process that happens gradually over the course of several patches, so there are no drastic changes in the gameplay of the ship since they started to adopt that style of balancing. This calculated measured approach allows us not to make any unnecessary changes. There are examples when either major changes are necessary. I assume that's like the Richthofen, because that bomb nerf was huge. Or the rocket change. Or when it's impossible to make minor changes. For instance, to reduce the attacking flight. You cannot remove a quarter or half of an aircraft. To reduce the attacking flight, you cannot remove a quarter or half of an aircraft. Oh, as in like, you can't take it from 9 down to like 8.5. Although technically you could reduce the health. I don't know if that's a great example, because I can immediately think of a way to kind of work around that as a design constraint. This approach applies to ships that are already available to all players. Test ships by nature are sometimes changed drastically. Sure, because they're in testing. This is because their true effectiveness can be analyzed and understood only during testing on the main server. This is correct. You need to see what it's like out in the wild before you can really get good data, unless you have a massive testing scene, and they do not. But not during the design and testing phases on the internal or public test servers, because they're not going to give you the same information. During these test phases, we will always consider two main options: either bring the current concept to the desired effectiveness or change it drastically enough. This depends on the feedback from testers and on statistics. We think we're about halfway done, so any questions from the chat? If you want to ask questions, we'll take like, I don't know, a few minutes maybe. Just if we got any questions along the way, because we've gone through about half of this, which is pretty significant. I think this is where we stopped. I'll leave that be. What are we doing? I'm doing a Ahskance Reacts to the Dev Q&A number 3, which is a Q&A that is on the World of Warships community Discord thing. Basically, players submitted questions and they answered them. So we're going through that, because evidently I was told Wargaming threw me under the bus. And, well, so far I haven't seen it yet. Rocket changes related to subs? Yeah, I think tangentially it is. Because if you pull pressure off of DDs, and DDs are the primary thing that's going to interact with subs, then you're pulling a little more pressure off destroyers so that they can deal with subs. And I guess it might also affect subs as well, but I mean, whatever. I heard something about you could one-shot a sub with rockets. I don't know if I could believe that, but whatever. I'm not a tester, so maybe that's something that leaked out of testing. I don't know. Found a player with a 25% win rate on your team today? That's pretty surprising. All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any questions, so I will continue doing the thing. You said a while back that you don't want to implement limitations to CV spotting because it would confuse players. I think this is in terms of minimap only spotting, if I recall. Yet there are render delay and minimap render only mechanics in the game already, which very few seem to complain about, which makes your reasoning pretty poor. Not to mention, many top-level players have provided feedback that spotting is one of the biggest culprits. Do you see CV spotting as a problem that needs solving at all? And in connection to that, is it technically possible to test limited CV spotting, such as minimap only or render delayed in brawls? They already have tested minimap only. They tested that internally. And I don't know about render delayed. I think that's radar. Yeah, because radar, your teammates don't see the ship until after 7 seconds. So basically it delays the rendering process for 7 seconds. So that's probably what that is. I think they tested that one as well, and that was also a no-go. Just to say, there's a podcast that Bogsy does. He used to do it with Synpax, now he does it with Borla from KSC, the KS clan. And they had Sub Octavian on. I think it's like a 2-hour interview. First hour was mostly about, who is he? How did he get into the scene? What's the job like? Stuff like that. And then I think the last hour was talking about the game and balance and stuff. And they did talk about CVs. They did talk about this it would confuse players thing, which was basically if CVs did not spot enemy ships and you could see the planes off in the distance shooting into the water, wouldn't that be weird? I mean, ultimately, it's a game. There's a lot of shit that's weird. Would it matter? But it really boiled down to, and I'm sure this all gets covered or at least touched on in all this stuff, but I'm talking about it now, so fuck it. One of the things that Sub Octavian said is, this game has a lot of mechanics. It has a lot of learning curve. It has a lot of things that interact with other things in specific ways and specific styles, and there's a ton of shit. If you really get into the guts of the game, there's a ton of shit to figure out. So every time they have a mechanic interaction, they need to do everything they can to keep it as surface level and intuitively understandable as possible. Because every time you introduce a mechanic that's kind of arcane or fucking weird, that really requires somebody to go outside of the game to a wiki, or where they would have to literally design some kind of in-game explanation thing, that's a problem. They realistically, ideally, with every game you play, you just intuitively understand. You walk into a building, ideally, you understand how to open the door. Oh, look, there's the handle. Turn the handle. You push, pull. Ah, there we go. I pull and it opens. Cool. Basic. Understandable. If you walk up to a door and there's no handle, okay, is there like a keypad? Nope, there's no keypad. And eventually it turns out that there's a rope down the hall, and you're supposed to walk over and take the rope and then walk all the way to the door with the rope, in which case by the time you get to the door will open. Who the fuck would think of that? Why would you do something like that? Why would you make some arcane, what the hell are you thinking when you're doing this situation? Well, it was to solve a problem. There were too many people going through the door, so we wanted to slow it down. I mean, it might work, but if it's not intuitive, if it just confuses the fuck out of players, or in the door example, people, then you start having a lot of ancillary issues that bleed off of that. So they made the decision. The minimap only thing, not going to work. The rendered delay thing, not going to work. So just long response to just this part, but let's go into what their acknowledgement is or whatever. while we do acknowledge that CV spotting could be improved, we don't see it as a critical problem right now, especially considering the recent changes to attack aircraft. Concerning this, our position on spotting has not changed. Carriers have excellent capabilities to detect enemy ships and can be overly effective in this regard, especially in competitive modes. Sorry, I'm reading this actually too quickly. Position on spotting has not changed. While we do acknowledge that CV spotting could be improved, we do not see it as a critical problem right now, especially considering the recent changes to aircraft. Okay, I can go with that. As far as this sentence right here, we don't see it as a critical problem right now. I mean, I agree with that, because a critical problem is something that is straight up ruining the fucking game. Now, I get it. You're going to have people that immediately, when they hear this, spotting is fucking the game. Oh, the carriers, they're terrible. I hate it. I get it. Sure. You don't like it. Awesome. Congratulations, you don't like it. But this is not driving people away from WoWs. This is not breaking the game. This is not making the game into an unfun ball of awful. This is not lighting the dumpster fire that is everything, burning the house down and suddenly destroying wargaming and condemning them to death and jettisoning out into space. It's not a critical problem. The game fucking works. People play clan battles right now, and yeah, there's like CV hurricanes and storms and stuff, like spotting is altered in clan battles, but they said even earlier in this that people in general are okay with clan battles being in, having carriers in a similar amount to the way that they're fine with clan battles not having carriers. So if they found rough parity, that does not suggest that this is just the end-all be-all that has to be changed because this is destroying the fucking game. Does that mean it's not an issue? No. But is it a critical problem? No. So, kind of keeping perspective sort of thing. Concerning this, our position on spotting has not changed. Carriers have excellent capabilities to detect enemy ships and can be overly effective in this regard, especially in competitive modes. Yeah, they can scout out the enemy formation and deployment. We are engaged in this issue, which is the evolution of the storms and stuff. However, recent tests of changes in the spotting mechanics have not yielded the desired results. The mechanics in the game should be simple and clear to everyone. I already talked about that. And testing showed that our latest ideas did not cope with this task and made the gameplay unnecessarily complicated. Alright, to be as transparent as possible, we'll list a few of the mechanics that we have tested in an effort to fix this issue, okay? We have been testing changes related to the detection of destroyers, depending on whether the AA defense is on or off. In theory, these kinds of mechanics should have greatly reduced the detectability of destroyers that were committed to turning off their AA defense. However, the usage of this feature was not the most obvious, and it quickly became inconvenient to most players, which made it impossible to add to the game in its current state. Okay, more details about the mechanic in particular can be found in our dev blog. I'm not exactly sure what that's referencing. Whether the AA defense is on or off. There was a thing where they would cut the detectability of all ships, not just destroyers, but all ships. But rather than being able to turn your AA off and then on and just have it 100%, like, you know, surprise motherfucker, Holland or something that just starts ripping your shit apart, it would have a ramping effect. Like, it would ramp up to 100% over the course of like 7 seconds or something. Which would basically mean if you lay doggo, if you ever read Honor Harrington books, if you're ever just like hiding in the middle of nowhere and then all of a sudden the planes trip across you, you don't turn it on and go to 0 to 100, you would ramp up while the planes are like, fuck, and then they try to reposition or something. So you don't completely ambush the planes. Although frankly, ambushing the planes while frustrating as hell for the CV is not really a bad thing. It's kind of good gameplay from the surface ship side, so I don't know, but I guess it didn't click. I was sad about that one. I thought that was actually a pretty elegant solution. We conducted minimap spotting tests. Many players and developers alike thought that this would be a good solution, but it didn't work. For most players, this change added a significant amount of ships to the battle that were detected only on the minimap. Okay. Players could not see or interact with these ghost ships, while an allied aircraft carrier engaged in combat with these would appear to be attacking water. Oh! Okay. Of course, such mechanics would indeed suit the most experienced players who are familiar with spotting mechanics, but this was very awkward and counterintuitive for the majority of test participants. Therefore, for the time being, we've decided to abandon this idea until we either find a way to eliminate all of the negative aspects of such mechanics or an alternative solution. I understand this better now. Okay. We also consider the idea of spotting with delayed rendering, as in a case of a radar consumable, but tests have shown that such mechanics have no significant effect on CV spotting. Yeah, so they just spot longer, I guess. Therefore, we are in search of new possible solutions. While it is technically possible to test a variety of mechanics in different battle types, we should only do this when we have a solution prepared for whatever issue may arise. These will then have to pass all stages of internal and closed testing. Okay, so one thing I want to say is, I guess the way they word this, you know, up here, basically makes it sound like, well, we don't think it's an issue right now, so we're not fucking with it. Well, I can tell you they are fucking with it. I don't know what testing they're doing. I don't know what the background stuff is, but I know that it's still something that they realize a lot of people are upset about this. We want to fix it. We just haven't figured out how to fix it yet. So I have tried to explain in other contexts and stuff that the first thing you're going to do is work on, you know, a primary interaction set. So CVs, that's mostly going to be damage. And they have worked on damage. They've worked on speed. They've worked on actual damage. They've worked on getting planes dead. They've worked on AA mechanics to make planes dead. They've gone through all that. They've kind of got that to where it needs to be. So once you've kind of locked that shit down is when you can start looking at ancillary issues. And I do know that these tests have kind of been in the work for like a year to a year and a half. They're obviously on the back burner. They're not like on the you know, oh, we're gonna fucking fix this now. But I do know that, you know, they are still looking at it. They're still dicking with it. But this little section here actually means a lot to me. So let's do this real quick. Let's do this. Okay, so what did he say? Let's actually go back to that. What did he say, or what was here? Players, okay. For most players, this change added a significant amount of ships to the battle that were detected only on the minimap. Players could not see or interact with these ghost ships, while an allied aircraft carrier engaged in combat with these would appear to be attacking water. So, what does that mean? Okay. I want you to imagine that you have finally convinced your parents to give this game a try. Your dad who loves Navy stuff, but he never fucked around with it. Or you finally got your friend to give this game a try or something. You finally got your girlfriend to give this game a try. Or you finally got your boyfriend to give the game a try. Whatever. And they go out, they play a map, they're sailing their ship around, and they're doing stuff, and there's some stuff that gets spotted. And there's some stuff that gets spotted and it's too far away and they can't see it. So, you know, their view range only goes so far, and they kind of figure this out. Okay, I can only see so far. I get that. I understand that. And the ships that are spotted that are closer, they can see them. Cool, they can see them. Now, granted, the game already bends reality, because if you're behind a rock, theoretically, you can't see this shit at all, because you're fucking hidden. You couldn't see that. But it's an arcade game. It's gonna spot you on this one. It gives you that information. Okay, cool. Well, that's nice. It gives that info to me. What if you're in a smoke cloud? Well, if they can't see you, how the fuck do you see them? The answer is you don't. But again, it's an arcade game. They're gonna give you that information. So what happens though, you know, you got your girlfriend playing the game, you got the thing, whatever, and they're sailing around, and there's all these ships that they should be able to see. But let's say there's this rock here, and maybe their teammates are dead, or their teammates are off doing something completely different, and they should be able to see all of this stuff because their view range is good. Or maybe the view range is even further. Maybe it's all the way out here, and it turns out little Papa Plane dude, you know, carrier's off hidden in the corner, comes over here and spots all this shit, and this dude can't see it, and there's no other surface ships that can. Well, suddenly there's all these red dots, and this person doesn't know why can't I see these? Now, on the one hand, if you are in the chair next to the person that you're teaching this game to, oh, the reason for that's because it's planes. Planes, they can see things and they tell you where the position of those things, but they don't actually allow you to see them. Okay. It's It's just one more roadblock. It's just one more hurdle. And in this instance, it might feel so blindingly weird that, like, this is, like, really close to me. Why the fuck can't I see it? Well, it's spotted. Yeah, but it's spotted by an airplane. Okay? It's one of those things that, could players overcome that hurdle? Yes. Players could learn, and then they could figure that out and overcome it. But when's the first time they're going to experience this? Tier 3. When do they get to Tier 3? 15 battles? Maybe? Give or take? Is that weird enough that somebody gets confused and kind of pissed off? That they can see things, but they can't see things? They can't shoot at it? Do they know why they can't shoot at it? Do they ask a question in chat? Do other people know why they can't see it? If they get somebody that knows, are they going to actually give them a real answer? Or are they going to tell them, fuck off, noob? That I can see being a potential problem. For somebody that's played the game for 2 or 3 years, oh, fuck, whatever, you know? Sure, it completely makes sense. To somebody that just doesn't know or understand the ins and outs of the detection mechanics, I could see how that could be weird as fuck. Especially if it's not like, well, whatever, the planes just went over here and they shot somebody off in the middle of nowhere. Like, what if it's legit? You've got an enemy ship that's, like, right here, about to come around on you, and you don't get to actually see them, even though they're fucking 3 kilometers away because a plane spots them. That could be really bizarre for somebody that's still figuring shit out. I hadn't thought of it in that way, but I could see how that's weird as hell. All right, so what is this? Okay. All right. Translation. Excuse me, but would it be possible to make an American battleships faster? For Tier 6, they have 26 knots among the French, versus 18 on the Americans. And until Tier 7, the Colorado, the American battleships are slow. In short, you passed French and Germany. Okay. I understand you perfectly. Coincidentally, my Vermont never reached the battle area while I was writing this answer. We try to maintain a variety of approaches into ship customization, specifically so that each of our players can find gameplay both interesting and personalized. U.S. battleships also find their audience here as well. The speed of the U.S. battleships is not only a part of the original concept on the implementation of the ships in the game, but it's also an important aspect of their historical context, which we relied on when creating them. Please also keep in mind that for the balance of the ship, its advantages in some characteristics will always be compensated with disadvantages in others. However, if U.S. battleships will be affected by meta changes or other factors, we'll consider balance changes to the ships, and I don't think we'll have to do anything like that in the near future. I think, like, Colorado's guns don't suck. I'm pretty sure they don't suck. They're appreciably well-sized. I mean, they've got a good amount of pen or something. So it's like, when he's saying for the balance of the ship, advantage in some characteristics will be compensated with disadvantages in others. If you're going to have better guns, you're going to have worse speed. If you're going to have better health, you might have worse armor. If you're going to have blah, blah, blah. Like, there's always trade-offs. This is just normal game stuff. That's standard. We all know that if a ship is too popular, it is bound to be nerfed or removed from the shop. Examples would be Smolensk, Smolensk, Thunderer. What about the not-so-popular ships like Yu-Yang and Khabarovsk? How few games need to be played in order for the extremely unpopular ships, like previously mentioned, would it take for Wargaming to look into said ship if it needs a buff and is, in fact, not balanced well enough? And no, you can't say Yu-Yang and Khabarovsk currently fit in a fine state of balancing, because if they were, then I wouldn't be able to count with one hand how many of said ships I've seen in combined random battles over the case of 6 months. Their response: we regularly evaluate all ships and make balance adjustments as needed. Popularity is one of the main metrics that we pay attention to. Low or excessively high popularity of the ship is a reason to analyze its effectiveness in detail. The outlying case would be if a ship is both strong and unpopular, in which case we can't just give it a boost, we would need to rebalance it entirely. At the same time, we're also comfortable having niche ships, ones that are not particularly popular, but with an interesting gameplay for a certain group of players. All these principles also apply to entire branches of ships. For example, French cruisers were extremely unpopular amongst our players. To solve this problem, we tested a modified concept by adding a reload booster to the ships, and we were completely satisfied with the results. The cruisers became distinctive and interesting ships for our audience. Specifically speaking, Speaking specifically about Khabarovsk and Yu Yang, the situation is as follows. Kaba is a quite unpopular ship among other researchable destroyers. However, it has a unique, non-standard gameplay that does not suit every player. But for those that do play her to her fullest potential, they show excellent results. The ship now has great combat performance indicators such as win rate, average damage, KD ratio. So it's not played by many, but the people that do play it real fucking well. So it fits them. It speaks to me. Whereas most people probably avoid it because everybody says it's trash, and or they play it and they don't like it. The situation with Yu Yang is more complicated. It's also quite unpopular among the other researchable destroyers, but this is partially due to the fact that its performance is now approaching the lower boundaries of the normal range. In the near future, we will continue to additionally monitor this ship specifically and analyze whether it needs balance changes. So they're basically saying it's lower than if there's a this is fine range, it's on the low end. So they might buff it, they might fuck with it. But one thing about the Yu Yang, the Yu Yang might not be a gearing, but the Yu Yang smoke makes it extremely powerful at tier 10 for comps that use its smoke. So while the Yu Yang itself might not be the destroyer that goes around fucking murder facing stuff, when used in a support fashion, the Yu Yang has a very low cooldown for a decent length smoke, which means rather than like a gearing, which is going to put down a smoke cloud that lasts a really long time, the Yu Yang puts one that kind of lasts a medium amount, and then you can move the ships and re-smoke. And then you can move the ships and re-smoke. Then you can move the ships and re-smoke. So while it might not be a gearing, it offers something that no other ship offers. And they were saying they're comfortable with having niche ships. Yu Yang might not be as strong as like the tier 9, for instance, in a tier for tier sense, but it still offers a unique niche, which in a way still allows it to be worthwhile of playing. So I think that's kind of where they're going with that, but it'd be nice if they buffed it. Consider this as both feedback and a question. Why were Dutch cruisers' balance subjected to airstrikes so much? Why were the Dutch cruisers balanced around airstrikes so much? Disclaimer, I am a tester, so I have a decent idea of what I'm talking about. These ships are weak and unenjoyable to play. They should be buffed to an acceptable and enjoyable power level while still keeping them subpar compared to their peers. Only then should the airstrike be fine-tuned to fit in. Right now, there is way too much emphasis on the airstrike that isn't even strong or consistent. And another similar question, why do you always seem to balance the ship around a gimmick instead of the other way around? Is there a reason for doing this? One of our main goals in developing ships is not only to create new ships, but also to bring variety to the gameplay. After all, if it doesn't change, it will quickly become stagnant and bore our players, which is very correct. Free-to-play games have to continue innovating, otherwise they lose players. That's just the reality of it. That's the truth. That's why we customize new ships not around gimmicks per se, but around gameplay concept. If we balance ships only around standard things like main caliber, armor, detectability, then ships themselves would be standard and largely the same, meaning the gameplay would stand still. In the standardized meta, all of their special features would be sidelined and turned to be and treated as weak. Tuned to be extremely weak, as the ships themselves would otherwise be too effective. So basically, if you are balancing around speed, armor, health, guns, torps, this, whatever, if that's all you're balancing around, and you just kind of like leave the gimmicks to the side, well then theoretically all that shit is well tuned so that you pick this ship or you pick this ship or you pick this ship. But if all you're doing is balancing around like the same 5 different characteristics, there's not a lot of variety there. There's just different power levels. Well, I'd like some level 4 guns but some level 5 speed. Well, I'd like some level 3 guns but some level 5 health. Like, there's the gimmicks, I guess, are there to enforce variety, enforce difference. So they're not willing to, I guess, just throw the gimmicks away, like they did with the French cruisers. I think they mentioned up here they added the reload booster to the French cruisers, and that was enough to differentiate them and allow them to be their own thing. Meaning the gameplay would stand still. In a standardized meta, all of these special features would be sidelined, as the ships themselves would otherwise be too effective, truly reducing their additional gameplay dynamics to gimmicks. Moving back to the Dutch cruisers, the airstrike is their main feature, and this in turn distinguishes them gameplay-wise from other ships. The first thing we had to do in developing these ships was to make sure that the airstrike was set up and working as intended. Despite the unique mechanics, we take all characteristics into account when balancing these ships. As such, these ships have very good armor and detectability range and decent air defense. It's too early to draw conclusions around overall combat effectiveness as the early access is not over yet, but judging by the feedback, many people have very warmly received these ships. That's all for today. You can expect another pack of answers in a couple days. So one thing with this, I actually had a conversation on the community contributor Discord about this, which was when you're making something, you might have something extremely basic. You made a chair. Now, realistically, how many different applications do you have for the chair? You sit in the chair. You might stand on the chair. You might put something on the chair. Realistically, there's only so much shit you can do with a chair. That being said, if you invite 1 million people to do something with the chair, there are going to be some weird fucking things that happen to that chair. Some of them probably sexual in nature. It's going to be some strange shit. And you honestly can't account for all the insanity that is going to happen with that chair. Some of that stuff might happen and be so surprising and so unexpected that you might just have to, no, I'm gonna have to take the chair back, or you might have to redesign the chair, or maybe instead of having legs, you have the chair as a square bottom so that it can't be used in RAR activities. Whatever. The core point of this, and the crass joke is, when something goes live, you will inevitably trip across the 2 or 3 or 10 or 100 different people that understand how to airstrike the ever-living fuck out of anything that ever moved. But you will probably find the hundreds of thousands of people that will almost never hit an airstrike. So it comes down to, how do you fit it so that the normal player can make use out of it, but it's not hyper strong? So realistically, in that case, they made it easier to land, which is exactly what they did in testing. It used to have a 25-second lead time, now it's down to 15. But it also used to do more damage in a tight area. Then they spread the damage over a larger area, so it can't deal as much damage to a specific area or small spot. Like, there are ways to tune and alter and balance this to make it sit, but you need time for people to fuck around with something and figure out how they're going to make it work, where its strengths are, where its weaknesses are, before you go in and start changing everything. So if you release it with guns that are frankly not great but passable, and this airstrike thing, and then people really start to take to the airstrike and the airstrike just fucking murders people, well, then you've got two options. One, you nerf the fuck out of the airstrike, in which case it's just another ship with kind of shitty guns. Or B, you nerf the guns into oblivion to account for all the added damage that the airstrike is doing, in which case everybody that has the ship is like, why the fuck did you neuter my ship? Like, the guns are trash now, they're tucking. Realistically, if you undertune the guns and you try to see how much of that airstrike is going to happen, move the airstrike to a comfortable level, and then if it needs it, buff the guns later. Why? Because then you don't have people that got something only to watch as it just melted away into nothingness. You get to put it to where it needs to be, and people like being buffed. They hate being nerfed. Which is a little counterintuitive, because when you release a new line, you almost want to release it on the edge of overpowered, because you want people to be like, ooh, I need to try this, and then balance it. But in this case, because of the potential for airstrikes to do what people saw in videos and shit that were released, oh, it's gonna break the game. It's not a bad idea to err on the side of caution. Pull back on the guns, let the guns be lower DPM, let them be lower performers per se, see what the airstrike is gonna add, because just like with secondary ships, the secondaries are gonna do X amount of damage. That's what they're gonna do. You walk close enough to somebody, the secondaries are going to start shooting, they're going to do damage. That's just truth. So how much of that damage do you have to pull out of the main guns so that you're not just an amazing ship that can also dumpster bitches with secondaries? Because if you made Dutch ships okay, but amazing if you land airstrikes, well, then that gets awkward. I don't know. Okay, so that's the whole Q&A. We did the thing. I didn't see where somebody threw me to the fucking wolves. So, well, yeah, I got trolled into this by a forum, which is not overly surprising. So if anybody would like to ask question and answer stuff, I'll give you just a little bit. Let's go maybe until 6:05 or 6:10. If anybody had specific questions relating to the Q&A stuff or any of the stuff that I put out. If y'all don't, then I can table this and then I can go in and start doing the flight instructor session. You missed that bus? What bus? What about Zhao? It needs a buff? Are you asking what about Zhao needs to be buffed? Evidently, it doesn't seem like... Well, according to them, not very much. Let me open something real quick. What is this? Maple syrup wows? Maple syrup wows. World of Warships? Am I reading this correctly? Maple syrup, sweet cocaine? What? Like, what the ever living fuck is this? I guess so. That seems to be the website. Wow, how hilarious is that? That doesn't give me anything. Return. PvP stats quarterly. How about that? Oh my god. How the fuck do you read this? Win rate, all, I guess. NA server? HTML? Sure. Well, I don't know what the fuck that means. Nope, and it's gone. So, sorry, I don't know how to do it. I am curious about how many, like if the Zhao is used, you know, 1,000 times a month, or how much it's used related to other ships. I don't know. As far as what does the Zhao need, I think it's got bad turret angles, it doesn't have a lot of health, and people wish it had more armor or something, but I don't know. Zhao was paid 1,500, 3,000 for Hindi. How much for the Venezia? How much for the Des Moines? If you can tell me what that is. Because the Des Moines is probably going to be pretty high because it's an American cruiser, and the Venezia I would assume would be lower than you know, the Des Moines Hindi, because I think it's more of an off-brand. Yeah, Des Moines is very popular. Health is the Zhao's biggest problem. Well, I mean, theoretically, the Zhao has bad health, but it has extremely good detection. He's firing up the PC to get the numbers. Okay, well, he can do the thing. You missed that bus? The one running you over? Oh, yeah. Yeah, the being thrown under the bus by Bandy. Yeah, sure. Are not smoke screens extremely difficult for new players to understand? Yes, actually, I think it's fairly complex, but at the same time, so here was an idea that I had. If you're, so like if a destroyer or something, right, gets spotted by planes and then a whole bunch of people start shooting at it, right? What happened if the only thing that sees the destroyer is the planes? What if you can't lock onto it? So normally, like, is this still in direct? Yeah, it's still in direct. Cool. So normally when you're shooting at something, whatever, we'll just say that, you know, there's water and stuff here. Ooh, yeah, water and stuff. Woo. And then you've got your surface ship that you're firing at. Here's the big mean surface ship thing doing big mean surface ship stuff. Ooh, it's a surface ship. Rawr. You can feel the terror. And here's like stuff on it. Oh yeah, and there's a gun. Anyway, so when you put your reticle on, when you get a lock on it, then if you want to shoot right here, you put your reticle basically there, and assuming the ship's not moving, this is roughly where your shells are going to go, right? This is the smart lock, or like the little smart firing kind of thing. Well, what if a plane was spotting it and you didn't get the lock on? Like, it just wasn't even an option. Well, there'd be two things. One, if it wasn't locked on, then the dispersion would be worse, because when you lock onto something, you reduce your dispersion cone, you cut it in half. And secondly, if you aimed here, you would be aiming back in the water off in the distance. You would shoot over the ship. You would miss the ship. You would actually need to shoot something like here to hit up there. Or if you wanted to hit, you know, in the dead center of the ship or something, you would need to be aiming here or something to try to really meet your shells on where the ship is, or slightly above that. But if you're trying to hit the superstructure, you might be aiming here, because the smart lock is going to change how it interacts with the ship. So on the one hand, an experienced player, if you weren't allowed to lock on to a ship because a plane was spotting it, well, that'd be understandable. But to a player that doesn't know the ramifications of what the fuck smart lock does, they'd be missing shells left, right, and center. They'd see the ship, but they'd be missing because they'd be placing their cursor completely wrong. Like, it's little things like this that are worth consideration. The game is not beginner friendly. It's the game has a lot. The game has a lot of mechanical stuff to it. Like, when I taught the Verizon training lesson thing on CVs, and they're like, you have 45 minutes. I knew I wasn't going to get all the basics of carriers in 45 minutes. I mean, that's got to tell you something, right? And there were people that are like, hey, you didn't talk about pre-dropping. Hey, you didn't talk about positioning. Hey, you didn't talk about this. I had 45 minutes. What am I going to do? All right, well, if there's any other questions from the Q&A, okay, 3,500 matches for the Des Moines. Yeah, it's hard to say it all in 45 minutes. Wargaming is poorly marketed this game for beginners. Well, it's not that the game isn't beginner friendly. 2.5 for Venezi. Okay, cool. It's not that the game isn't beginner friendly, because tier 1 is not that scary. Tier 1 is pretty basic. Like, when I started playing on the Southeast Asia server, because supposedly the CVs there are godlike, so I mean, hey, if you're going to train against the best, right? You're forced to play just tons of tier 1 games. And realistically, see ship, shoot ship is pretty basic. Then in tier 2, you get AP and the concept of a citadel. And then eventually there's torps and stuff that are involved. And then eventually there's a smoke screen that's involved. So, like, there are additional pieces to the puzzle as you go up, but, like, innately, the basic game is pretty basic. Yeah, WoW's easy to play but tough to master. Yeah. There's no game worth playing that isn't complex, that doesn't require learning knowledge. Gamers these days are just lazy. Well, I guess you could say that. I mean, technically there's tic-tac-toe, right? How many people are going to spend like 50 or 1,000 hours studying tic-tac-toe concepts and procedures? And yet, this is something you can play with a little kid, because it's not that scary, right? I mean, like, it doesn't have to be something that requires lifetime of dedication. Like, not all games are gonna have 1,000 hours, or like Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers is not that complex. It doesn't require a huge amount of learning. You just run around and play the game until you don't want to play the game anymore. Super Mario Brothers is an international hit, spawned an entire franchise. It's been huge for consoles for years. I mean, it is what it is. Okay. Complaints about Wargaming is nowhere near warranted as Rockstar deserves. Okay. Alright, so it's about 6:10, so I think we have done the thing. Yeah, so in terms of the question and answer stuff, I'm sorry, there wasn't anything scary here. One of the things that was the coolest part for me to read was this. Put simply, we have made adjustments over the past few seasons, and based on feedback and player evaluations of seasons with carriers are now close to the evaluations of seasons without them. That is completely surprising to me. That's completely surprising to me. I mean, in a way it's not, because adding the carrier doesn't really, like, it doesn't turn the whole world upside down. It just doesn't. It makes it different, sure, but it doesn't completely, like, destroy the integrity of clan battles. It just adds more, it adds more complexity, it adds more things to it. More stuff to worry about, stuff to factor in, stuff to plan around. Anyway, Yeehaw did the thing. So,